Fancy changing job or trying a new career? Data is at the center of everything we do, from providing critical services to the front line to delivering the latest news and entertainment into hands and homes all over the world. All of this is made possible because of the data center industry, one of the world's fastest growing industries. At Host in Ireland, our partners have a wide range of jobs available, from engineers to project managers, electricians to technicians. To find your next job, visit the jobs page at hostinireland.com.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to another Host in Ireland webinar. Just before we get started, just one or two little housekeeping tips. The format of today's webinar will be a panel discussion followed by a question and answer session. But you can, of course, at any time input questions that you may like to ask by using the Q&A button there located at the bottom of your screen. As with all of our webinars, we do expect quite a significant number of questions, so we will try to get to as many as we possibly can today. In saying that, if you are inputting a question and you see one that is similar to the one that you would like to ask, we suggest you would upweight that question so it'll rise to the top of the pile. For those of you who are joining us today on LinkedIn Live, we do have somebody monitoring that also, so you can also absolutely put in a question and it'll be popped into the room here for our panelists to see and answer. A copy of the report will be sent to everybody who registered for the webinar this afternoon. And of course, if you are joining us on LinkedIn, we will be posting the link on there and on our other social media accounts, so you can download a copy also. So without further ado, I will hand over to our moderator for this afternoon, Joyce Waddy. Over to you, Joyce.
There we go. Thank you, Tanya. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome you to Host in Ireland's webinar, Untapped Potential, the Data Center Opportunity. My name is Joyce Waddy. I am the head of communications for Host in Ireland, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. So, why are we here today? Creating, attracting, retaining, and developing talent is going to be one of the biggest challenges facing a post-pandemic data center industry for the next 5 years. Data center capacity is expanding in historic proportions across every geographic region, and data center operators of all sizes are increasingly concerned about the availability of staff and skill sets required to manage that growth. Earlier this year, the Uptime Institute published its first global data center staffing forecast. And in it, they noted that there will be a net staff growth of more than 300,000 data center jobs worldwide by 2025, with many of those in technical operations. As a society, we are both professionally and personally relying on data more than ever before, and this trend is likely to continue. In fact, the chief economists at the United Nations have jointly identified climate change and technological revolution as two of the 5 megatrends that will shape our world over the next century. We've seen this in action over the last 2 years as the pandemic became a springboard for digitalisation and changed our expectations of how we interact with technology. Running in parallel to this is the decarbonisation of our societies. This is an increasingly urgent issue affecting countries all around the world. The place where digitalisation and decarbonisation intersect is none other than the data center. With these two major shifts, our ability to create, attract, and retain the talent needed will be key to the success of the industry. And that brings us back to why we're having this conversation today. Earlier this morning, Host in Ireland launched a special edition of our biannual report focusing solely on talent in the data center industry. If you'd like to download the report, we have posted a link in the chat that will take you to our website where you can get a free copy of the report. One of the highlights in the report is the published results of our second annual business sentiment survey. We asked companies in the data center ecosystem in Ireland for their business outlook over the next 12 months. And what we learned is that the business sentiment is strong, steady, and consistent with the results from last year's survey. In 2021, 82% of the companies we talked to expect their employee base to grow in Ireland over the coming year, and 92% feel positive or very positive about their business prospects. Given the challenging economic times many industries in Ireland have been facing in the last year, it's great to see optimism and enthusiasm from our data center partners on the direction that their business are heading. In this report, we also asked for some insights and understanding from our partners and guest contributors about the talent challenges that they are seeing in the industry. Today, we are lucky to have individuals from those contributing companies join us as guests for this webinar. So now would be a great time to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Dermot Reedy from Enterprise Ireland. Dermot is the strategic advisor and client portfolio manager for construction services, and he's going to be sharing his insights with us on how Ireland has evolved through similar transitions in the past and the opportunities Irish companies are creating here and abroad. Our next speaker will be Teresa O'Brien from CBRE. Teresa is the Global Talent Acquisition Director for Data Center Solutions. She's going to talk with us today about current data center industry hiring trends and specifically look at the transferable behaviors and skills that are needed for transitioning to a career in the data center industry. And finally, we'll be speaking with Fergus Berry from Kirby Group Engineering. Fergus is the head of human resources and is sharing with us why this is such an exciting time to be a part of the data center industry and how Kirby Group is helping the next generation of engineers embrace it. So with all of that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. Dermot, I'm going to start with you. Irish companies have kind of become the go-to group for both professional services and construction-related data center activities in the EU region. Can you give us a little bit of background on how that's evolved over the last 10 years?
Yes, I can. Indeed, Joyce, thank you for inviting me, and welcome to the audience. And I hope that what I have to contribute is useful to you. So some of it is history, like 2008. Some of us will remember, hopefully not too many of us. My graphic is up there. So 2008, which is the left-hand piece, said stop, think and protect, because it was a crisis. GDP fell from 24% to less than 5% contribution from the construction industry. So that is just a big picture. We move on. 2009 to 2010 was a time of strategy and configuration. And so strategy was about looking at what our strategies were. Did we have a strategy? Did those construction companies have a strategy? And what was it? Often in terms of those strategies, we base the discussion around competencies and also on configuration of the company. Another big issue is capacity in terms of HR, and I know Fergus Barry will deal with that later. But there's also a term finance. If you go back 2008, there was a crisis. There was a drop in GDP. There was a lot of companies going to the wall, and so therefore capacity to undertake contracts was financially was a serious issue. So the other issue then is capability. In other words, have you the capability? If you're a house builder, there was no point in getting into specialized or high-tech construction unless you were going to go on an extreme learning curve. So those were the sort of issues at play between 2009 and 10 with the clients, Enterprise Ireland clients. And, obviously there were some who weren't, but the majority were. We had about an attrition rate of not far short of 50% in the construction services industry. So this was a big change, a game changer for the industry. So the decision coming from strategy and all of those issues, if you just look at the right-hand part of that slide, is diversification and specialize. And so then it was looking at high-tech construction. And the question then is, where is that high-tech construction? What is that high-tech construction? So very simply, the guidance we had given was that It was in the area of power. It was in the area of pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceuticals, and it was in the area of data. And the reason for that was construction companies had reference projects in Ireland that they had worked on. But interestingly enough, very few of them had worked abroad in any substance overall. There was very little in terms of exports. So from 2010 on, it was about looking at markets home and abroad. It was about researching and then executing. So what are you going to export? What's your value proposition? What are you going to research and report? And what clients, markets, and industries are you going to look at? And those are the real important pieces. That piece of research in that part of that graphic was really, really important. And not many companies had that capacity within them at that time. So that brings us to, again, another level of change in the configuration and the competencies and the capacity and capability of our construction companies. And then from 2013 on, if you look at the very right-hand part of the slide, you'll see execute. And execute is about bringing your value proposition to your client. It's about showing your point of difference. And it's about going to places where maybe you hadn't been before, and for quite a few, they had not been there before. For example, Ireland, various markets across Europe, in the EU, the UK, and of course a complexity of Brexit came in between. And then obviously, and at a longer view, elsewhere in the world, and particularly in Africa, which is now a huge and growing market. But our job in Enterprise Ireland is to look forward and to try and anticipate these changes. The construction change graphic you've just seen actually shows a specialization and an internationalization over a period of 2008 to 2020-21. And now we have 9 companies with over $1 billion in turnover and over 1,000 employees. We have 5 companies at $500 million and 500 employees. And all of those companies have 50% of their revenues are exports. So that gives you a picture of how the changes come, right? 50% attrition 2008, 2010, and now you're looking at Ireland as a preeminent player in the construction, and that means the design, the construction management, and the construction and the handover, the commissioning of these facilities. And the pipeline, I'm glad to say, is good. And most of those companies are part of the Host in Ireland group. And most of those companies are abroad and with very, very active pipelines. So that's a bit of a picture for you. But here's the list of skills or competencies which didn't manifest itself in capacity or capability in these companies. And these are the areas which have, since 2010 to now, been developed and are now where a lot of companies are looking for staff. So areas of validation, areas of compliance, areas like health and safety. Health and safety, for example, is widely different than it was in 2008, 2010. Payroll. People must get paid, and they have to get paid abroad. And there's a whole tax piece behind that as well. There's a legal piece behind that. And there's the HR piece in terms of finding those people and embedding them within the culture of the company and in the culture of the marketplace and the project. Building information management has definitely changed dramatically since 2008-10 and brought us wildly different ways of looking at planning, pre-construction, off-site manufacturing, and detailed engineering. In terms of HT, MV, and LV, and networks, so that's high tension, medium voltage, and low voltage, and networks, you know, that's a totally different picture. I mean, in 2010, even in 2010, did we have offshore wind as a major player? No. Had we got ITER down in Cadarache in France, which is going to replicate sunlight in generate electricity at a massive scale? No. So our networks have changed dramatically. They changed dramatically since then, and they will change yet again. Again, more opportunities. In areas of fiber optics, in areas of marketing and selling and web enablement, the world has totally changed for these companies. Very, very few of these companies would have had a marketing capacity, a formal marketing or research capacity of any kind in 2010. Now, all of these companies have a serious marketing capability and a serious CRM capability in terms of managing the relationships with their clients, and all of the pieces that go into that, and turn the discussion about their capability and capacity into
I think
selling
what's fascinating to me about listening to this from you, Dermot, is just I think this is such a great example of the depth and the breadth of the data center ecosystem.
Oh yeah,
all of these different jobs that you've just mentioned have just really given. Really, it really does exemplify how the industry has changed. We talk a lot about how jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago, are are existing today, and it kind of makes you start to wonder, what's going to come down the line in the next 10 years that we're not going to be aware of.
Absolutely. And you take a simple example of maybe even LinkedIn, and how many construction companies who are in this space now have a presence on LinkedIn, and I mean a positive presence on LinkedIn. Yeah. Well, there's someone doing that, right? It's not the CEO.
No,
it's not the CEO having his cornflakes, right?
As we know, with our team here, absolutely. Correct. There's a lot of different people playing.
So if you look at these and other web enabling ways of promoting either yourself within a job environment, or your company within an industry environment or a specialization environment, they're all there. That was like looking at steam trains back in 2010. It just wasn't there. So I suppose there's the picture I give. I'll answer your questions now, Joyce.
No, that's okay. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to hold off until we do the kind of the
sure.
Was just the speakers. But I mean, I think it's actually kind of a good segue into to Teresa now, because Teresa, with CBRE, you guys are operating data centers all around the world, and so you probably as I mentioned in the introduction, we were talking about the Uptime report that in the next less than 5 years, we're going to be seeing that deficit of jobs that are being created to support the industry. So, what do you think is driving those trends, and how is a company like CBRE trying to address that within your environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, as much as I'm in a global role, Ireland has always been one of the critical markets for our success. So I'm really excited to be here today and talking to everyone about the Irish market specifically. So the data center sector is a super exciting, high growth sector to work in. Something that we talk about a lot. Joyce, you and I have had this conversation before as well. It feels like the fastest growing market that no one's ever heard of. So within the sector, we're all really well networked. We're talking to lots of people today in the sector. But I think one of the challenges we have is we're growing really quickly, but unlike lots of more mature markets, people don't go to school necessarily thinking, right, I want to grow up and have a job in data centers. So that's something that I think is exacerbating this challenge around, we're not just high growth, but people don't naturally know to come and work for us. So that's something I think we need to look at. Obviously, we talked there about changing us in different types of roles, but also the Internet of Things is really driving this growth for us as well. If you think about how many online devices and apps that you have in your house, certainly, I've got probably far more than I should have. But I mean, that's just going to keep growing. We know that, the creation and consumption of data over the past 10 years has been growing exponentially. And with that drives the need for more data center construction, more data center use, more data center operations. So it's just getting faster and faster and bigger, which is really exciting. But it just means the demand for talent is really high. And we've also got this what we refer to as the silver tsunami. So the average age of a typical HVAC engineer globally is 54. That's not a CBRE statistic, that's an industry statistic. And that's just one of the skill sets that we use. And that's kind of replicated across lots of the different skills we have in the industry. with inexperience traditionally being associated with downtime. We know that that's absolutely something that we need to, mitigate against. So we've traditionally had a lack of established next generation career paths, and we haven't, really built up that pipeline of talent into the sector. So those are some of the challenges we've got, which are leading to this, predicted future deficit. But what we're doing at CBRE, is a real, diverse range of action planning to try and mitigate these risks and enable everyone to be successful in the future. So one of the things that my team and I talk about a lot is, just headhunting from other organizations isn't sustainable. We're growing, our competitors are growing, our customers are growing, and there's enough opportunity for everyone to come on this fantastic journey. But if we just headhunt from competitors or other people in the sector, it's not sustainable. We know we've got diversity challenges in the sector, so we're not going to create more diversity in the workforce if we're just taking from someone down the road. And equally, there's just too many jobs. Even if we did that to everyone, there'd still be loads of gaps. So we've been focusing on things like next generation talent. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because I know Fergus is doing a whole piece on that, but certainly looking at bringing people in at that entry level, apprentices, future leader graduates, interns, really looking at that as an organization. And what we found really rewarding in that as well is that at that entry level, talent is a lot more diverse. Our cohort for this year was 53% diverse, or identified 53% of them identified as diverse, which is really exciting for us because it means that we can change the industry from the bottom up and make it more reflective of the communities that we're operating in. We've also been collaborating with academic institutions. So again, being an immature market compared to the likes of manufacturing, aviation, and what have you, there's not those clear academic qualifications to get you into data centers. In fact, I could probably name a handful and that's about it. So we've been collaborating with technical colleges, universities, other organizations, other businesses in the sector, have also been working with us on this. It's been a real cross collaboration to start building out some academic programs whereby we can either take that next generation talent in on vocational courses or actually careers transition people from other sectors with aligned skill sets to give them that fast track into the DC sector. Also, something that we've done that we've been really successful is hiring against behaviours. So, I can't tell you how many times people come to us and say, right, we need someone with 20 years data center experience. A finite number of those people. And guess what? Everybody's looking for them. So what we did a few years ago is I actually led a project working with an external assessment provider to identify the behaviors that we needed to be really successful in the data center space. So we looked at our organization, we looked at high and what it was that made those people really successful from a behaviors perspective. Then we identified key qualifications to align to that, but it enabled us to look into other sectors where there were populations of talent with the right technical qualifications and the right behaviors who perhaps didn't have data center experience. And that's really enabled us to go into all sorts of markets with established talent, immature markets with no data center talent at all, and bring people in. And what's been particularly ratifying for us on that perspective is not only has it enabled us to create more diverse and sustainable talent pools, but people that have come through that route and been really successful with those behavioural assessments have proven to be really successful in role and have progressed through the organisation very quickly, which has been exciting. We're also doing a lot of work around marketing and raising the profile, as I mentioned. But for the amount of opportunity in our industry, if you're not in the industry, lots of people have never heard of it. I gave you the example, Joyce, when I moved into the data center sector, my parents thought I was moving into the dating sector. And that was quite a horrifying conversation to have. I was very clear with them, it's the data center sector. But one of the things, I was at an event a few years ago where we had a panel with a lot of emerging talent. So people that had won, Future Stars Awards. And we were talking to them about how did they get into the sector. And I always remember, one of them was at university studying electrical engineering, had never heard of the data center sector, headhunted by one of the top hyperscale providers. Another one had gone into an apprenticeship, again, with just a general FM business, who had then branched out into the data center sector and had found his way in that way. And what I thought was really interesting was this was our top industry talent and they'd never heard of the sector before someone went out and found them. So, I think, there's a lot of work that we're doing now to drive that talent to the sector rather than us constantly having to go out and try and bring that. So try and make it a lot more proactive.
Yeah.
But those are some of the things that we've been doing that have been successful so far. And I'm sure lots of people that are here today are also doing similar things in their organizations.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. And yeah, look at your comment about the most, the best kept secret, which really shouldn't be a secret for everybody. So
yeah,
and actually that's actually kind of a good transition over to Fergus, because one of the things that we've talked about in the Host in Ireland report from Kirby Group is about the emphasis on graduates. And Teresa just kind of touched on it, what they've been doing with CBRE. But for Fergus, you guys have actually been focusing not just on the construction roles for graduates, but the non-construction roles at your company, as your company grows to be more of a professional services organization. So, what are you guys doing in that for the talent, and why is it so important, for attracting that generation of talent to your organization?
As Dermot said originally, there we've got huge growth in the industry. It's been sustained over the last few years. We've added over 600 people in the last 2 years to Kirby Group. The majority of the roles required are in the engineering, quantity surveying, and actually craft end of things. But particularly there's a shortage globally of engineers for our business. And you try and pick the best, attract the best is the challenge though, because in early 2000, the book was issued called The War for Talent. And I see in 2020, a book has been written called The War for Talent is Over. Talent has won. And we're truly hitting that stage now where unless you attract people, they will not come. It's like the best mousetrap in the world. You have to attract them, you have to market it. And this industry has been quiet, as Teresa said, it's been quiet in marketing its importance, its global growth, its key role in the digital world that our young people in particular are living in and embracing as digital natives. And what we're looking at is that the cathedrals of this century, of this millennium, will actually be the data centers. It's actually where the infrastructure, where we're holding the data of this new data revolution, and to both design, build, commission, deliver, operate this core part of our digital infrastructure. We require people with the STEM skills, and that means bringing people in from the start of their career and giving them a pathway. But to do that, you have to attract them. So people need to know, what is the industry? What are we doing? How meaningful is it? How it supports sustainability, how it's supporting the modern world and where we're going. And they need to know that this is at the center, that this is really important, because we've done a lot of research around young people in particular, and they want jobs with purpose, with meaning, and jobs that make a difference.
Yeah.
If you're building the digital infrastructure that's enabling all our modernization, it's enabling us to actually truly become sustainable, you're actually looking at a situation of we have to sell that message. And that's the first piece, because young people in particular, they want to do something meaningful, something purposeful, and any engaged employee at any level, they want to do something meaningful. So our first piece is to attract them to this industry that is really important, that involves some of the top companies on the planet, that is at the core of the betterment of human society and of all the things that they do through their digital interactions. And that includes our, if we want our electric cars or self-driving cars, it'll all be enabled by data centers and what they provide. The second thing we believe they're looking for, and we try to wrap into our employee value proposition, is a very great sense of fairness, equity, what's right. So at Kirby, we've pushed on being what we call a values-driven company. And most major companies have their values and they strive to live by, make their decisions by. And again, our first one is putting people first. So our value proposition is that we're actually doing something meaningful, doing something really worthwhile for mankind. But in doing that, we think people are the most important value. So that's what we're offering. That's what we're trying to attract people into. Second piece that our research would tell us, and most academic research would tell us, is that people want portable skills. Now that sounds, if you give portable skills, they can leave you. But that's the true love of the employment relationship. If I truly give you portable skills, you'll stay. Why will you stay? Because you've got a career, you're learning, you're developing, you're becoming more valuable. And we have 1,300 people this morning. Every one of those who learns something new, who develops their capability, makes Kirby richer, makes them richer. And that's what we're trying to ensure in our value proposition, is that piece is come, learn. And to do that, you have to have structured talent development within the organization. And that has to begin early career stage, whether at an apprentice. We pick out our apprentices. We have 200 apprentices at the moment. So that's our investment in the future of those apprentices. We have people on the board of Kirby, some of my colleagues, and they've come from apprenticeships in Kirby. And that's again showing you can actually develop a full career to be a director of 350, 400 million euro international business by starting as an apprentice, even without starting in college. You can add those things later, and we'll support people to do engineering degrees and that later. On the graduate engineering level, then what we're looking at is you join us, and again, we've got a pathway that begins to change salary very, very quickly for the graduate engineers, whereas salary changes when they're just a year in, and salary changes again when they're 18 months in. And we've learned that the hard way, is that unless you actually, it's very interesting, you take somebody from college, a young person, you take them in to the workplace, a year in, their value has increased, both to Kirby and their value to the industry. In fact, in one of my early graduate rounds, I remember I lost some people at around 22 months at hugely inflated salaries, and they went to our competitors, who we respect. And what our competitors were saying to me by stealing those people was, what you took them in at a graduate amount, we're going to change their salary at 24 months. We've grabbed them from you because they're actually worth more than that. So we very quickly realized that, in fact, the value changes so fast for a new graduate when they're learning on the job, and you put structured learning in place, that their value increases, our company value increases. But that's the pathway, that's what young professionals want. So our value proposition is to actually train them to increase their value, to do something meaningful and worthwhile. That's international also, and that's something that attracts graduates as well. Yeah. And again, it's trying to reward. The third piece of it is they want reward. They actually want money, and that's very important. So you cannot, as Maggie Thatcher would say, you cannot book the marketplace. Yeah. And again, that's something that I can say for the data center industry, and not just saying for Kirby, but the reward is there. It's a growing industry, a developing industry. With that growth and development is the opportunity to progress, but also because of the supply and demand, salaries are up and they are progressive. And that's the third part. So our employee value proposition, which is based upon developing the individual as a technical leader, commercial leader, because we are in business. And again, if you want to make business leaders for the future, and a people leader, which fits in exactly with our values, becomes essential on that. Who does something meaningful, and who we are investing in your development, and we will reward you. That resonates, and that enables us to actually recruit. But one of the classic pieces that you've asked me to look at here then is where is the untapped potential? Because the pools from which we were originally hiring, as all the industries, as our competitors also grow, we're all looking in the same pools. Yeah. The pools have become, they're not adequate to provide. So we're helping the colleges with our competitors. We're helping the colleges actually market programs like building services engineering, which fits right in. And it's a very good place to start. And some courses have very few people enrolling in them. And level 7 engineering programs, where you can actually take people from them, even sponsor them for a level 8 or 9, but take them and actually train them and move them forward. So we're having to look differently, not always at the highest points engineering course, but looking to see where are those pools. We also need to look from a diversity and inclusion perspective, and that means encouraging people who wouldn't normally have the opportunity or feel that engineering or data centers were the place for them. And in that case, we're having to go back, usually with the colleges, to the school element of things. So we have partnerships with local schools where we actually bring in our engineers, our early stage engineers, to present to the classes and explain, this is what we do, this is where we go, this is what makes it good, this is what it's worthwhile. And we also give challenges and games where they can actually play with some engineering concepts. And again, we're trying to push diversity and inclusion, and that could be, that's on a gender element, and we're making very good inroads on having more females in engineering, which will give us more females in leadership in the organization. But that's just one start. We're also with one major third level college, we're supporting people from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, where we're actually sponsoring, we're paying for their degrees in engineering and quantity surveying, but we're also taking them in for Christmas and summer work so that they actually have an income stream to support them. And we actually work with the college, identifying people who are genuinely disadvantaged and helping them through, hence enlarging the pool from which we're taking. Obviously, the other places we can enlarge those pools from is from other geographies, and we have over 50 nationalities now working for our company. So again, it's about bringing people through and then into a structured graduate development program. But that structure is into 6 months. Every 6 months, what are you learning? What are you developing? And giving people mentors.
So it's interesting because both you and Teresa have kind of touched on this, the idea of pathways and of identifying behaviors. What if someone is listening today? What are they? And if they're not in the industry, or they aren't really aware that could be a career option for them, how can they go about understanding what are some of the skill sets that I have that could be applicable? What am I doing today that actually would be really of a high value in a data center organization?
Yeah, if you look at any of the STEM skills transfer very clearly, and any of the key competencies that are logic based, that follow the rules of science, that follow the rules of mathematics and logic, that's what we're applying. Okay. This is the science of the future. So we do need people with those aptitudes. We can train them once they have the aptitudes. We've got great partnerships with the colleges. We've got great internal training. And if in doubt, send us your CV. Let us look and let us sort of suggest where. And I must say us, I mean, not just Kirby, I mean the industry. The industry as a whole. Yeah. But again, one of the things that grows when companies grow is the sophistication of the HR and talent acquisition teams. And that sophistication is actually there in the industry now. Largely, I think, because of the shortness and because of the growth, because of the shortness in talent availability. So very happy to actually look at that. I was involved in a previous industry where we transferred the skill set of many civil engineers to electrical engineering in partnership with a college, but whilst they were working. And again, those transitions will always be needed, will always be happening. And again, if you take the fossil fuel area, there's a lot of jobs going to be lost in that area. Those people have great skills that are very transferable to the data center world.
Teresa, what about for you? What are some of the things that you guys see are the most transferable skill sets, or the behaviors like you've talked about? What are the things that you guys are looking for when you're recruiting talent in?
And absolutely, I think I'm glad that you mentioned behaviors there, because that's been one of the most successful things that we've done to get on the, ahead in the race in the war for talent. It was deploying this behavioral assessment a few years ago, creating that bespoke assessment for CBRE. Because for us, we have got amazing examples of people that have come in and they might not even have come from a technical background, but we are surrounded by data center experts. We can impart that knowledge. We've got, really rigorous training programs. We partner with external organizations as well as our internal training programs to ensure that people are have the right skills and competence to be successful in the role. But we found that focusing on behaviours has been one of the most pivotal points in really changing our ability to be proactive. And I think, it's, looking as an organisation at what are those behaviours that the people that are really successful demonstrate, and then looking at, aligned sectors where people have to demonstrate those behaviours, or where they've got the aligned qualifications or similar qualifications, and bringing them in and training them up. But we've got a wealth of data centre knowledge and expertise, which allows us to then focus on, more behavioural attributes. And when we did this, it was a big global exercise. We worked with an external provider. We, interviewed all of our executive committee. We engaged all of our regional managing directors, but we also worked with our teams on different contracts in all of our regions. So in the Americas, in the Asia Pacific region, and in EMEA. And what was really interesting as part of that process was everybody identified the same behaviours.
Oh, that is interesting.
Really important to be successful in this environment. There was a moment where I thought, wow, what if everybody comes back with something different? This could be quite a challenge to create this. But all of the regions identified, and they all had examples of where they hired people onto their teams who might not have been the most technically qualified or had the most, obvious transferable experience, but they had the right behaviours and they've gone on to be really successful. So I would say, that's one of the really key things that we focus on.
So Dermot, I mean, kind of playing off of this, what are, you see Irish companies operating, around the world, operating throughout Europe. What do you hear from your perspective of, what's happening in Ireland, and how does that translate to other European countries? When the companies are building and creating jobs, what is it about, what is happening that's really good in Ireland that makes that stumbling over my words here, that is appealing to expanding into other countries? Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Yes, there you are. There's the first mistake of the day made. So one of the things that is really, really clear is that Ireland has reference sites. It has familiarity with the clients. And if you look at all the hyperscalers, and for that matter, the co-locators, they're nearly all based in Ireland here. And so therefore, they're on our doorstep and we have relationships with them. But the argument or the discussion from 2010 onwards was, and maybe even in 2013 onwards was, hey folks, can you reconfigure those conversations and those relationships to include other parts of the world and outside of Ireland? So how's that done? Well, one of the things we do here in Enterprise Ireland, certainly I've done with all my clients, is around systems management. In other words, a familiarity with lean, with world-class manufacturing, totally TQM, total quality management, or in effect JIT, which is just-in-time manufacturing. All of those have behaviors of operation and behaviors, personal behaviors, which, and as Fergus goes, as I go over back to Fergus, have a logic to how they operate. And so for any applicant who's even outside of any of the loops, and I came up with 21 different job types that have been generated within the industry in the recent past, the last 10 years, 12 years. But anyone who doesn't have any of that, and they have lean, maybe they have a green belt or a yellow belt in lean, they're in the game. Absolutely, because this is operating on logic, it's operating on behavior, it's operating within, it's a very defined and internationalized way of dealing with things. And it also is, when you have these skills and you have these knowledge, either as a company or an individual, you have a different conversation with your major suppliers in terms of your supply chain and how they will interact with you. It's not there for buying on the open market against a standard specification. It is about planning your production, planning the order, scheduling things, making sure that the logistics are right, correct, and behind it. So all of those issues are at play there. And if you were to put any of those behaviors or systems of management into any of the 21 areas I've spoken of, you would look at a radically different method of approaching. So when somebody said, how do I approach, or how do I go for it, or send me on your CV, if you can configure your CV anywhere around any of these areas, and listen in again, I came up with 21 different areas, and you overlay that with a systems management of some kind, you know, you're there. I mean, you could use lean on marketing as easily as you can use it on detailed engineering or fiber optics or selling, even, for that matter. So it's there. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I'm seeing a bunch of questions starting to come in from the audience, and I want to make sure that we've got some time for that. So let's go ahead and take this first one. It says, what route can one take in Ireland if you're wanting to do a career change from civil engineer to data analyst or scientist without going back to college? So I don't know. Fergus, why don't you give me your thoughts on that one?
I don't have a direct answer on that now, but I'd suggest that there is some sort of part-time program in data analytics. I'm not sure which college or which distant college. And again, because of digitization, there is surely some programs there. So I would look for a distance program, and I would highlight the engineering skills and the interest on the CV to go through that. And actually look, I'd start looking for some support on such a program, talking to the firm. So again, it's that piece of sort of saying, if I don't want to go back to college, but I do need to learn about data analytics, there are online programs. There are what we would call executive programs, which means ones that are 9 to 5 daytime programs where you can actually learn without having to actually break back to a formal college piece, which are very expensive, but they're also there. So again, it would be to highlight the skills and behaviors, as Therese would say there, that the individual has as an engineer, that would make them naturally suited for data analytics work.
Yeah.
And to then engage with and explore it as regards what's the appropriate program, what's the right program to take. And again, as I say, if they want to send an email or something, we'll get back something a little bit more specific than that.
Cool. One of the other questions that's here is, are there assessments that can be taken as an entry level into the data center industry, and would it be possible to have such? So Teresa, is there anything that you're aware of that, like any kind of self-assessments, or maybe a third-party assessment that might help someone understand if they have a good skill set to bring to the data center industry?
So that's a really good question, actually. And I think there's, what I would say is there's not one single standardized assessment, but, there are lots of online assessments that look at, the skill sets that you need to come into this, and you can easily find them online to really look at, what you would need. But I think also what's really would be useful for anybody that's considering getting into the data center sector would be, reach out, right? We need loads of people, and everyone's, I think, compared to other quite static sectors, I'd be very surprised if you reach out to anybody in the data center sector and they didn't try to give someone with the right attitude, the support to learn more about it and come into the sector, because we're all really keen to support talent coming to the sector. But also, I think it's actually learning about what do we do? What are the different roles in the sector? Because there are so many opportunities right away from the planning phase, the design phase, the construction, all the way through to the operations. And also, it's not just about those sort of, right on the front line roles. There are tons of support roles in the sector: sales, finance, procurement, commercial, analytics, everything around this. It's a massive industry. So I think it's worth actually just, doing a bit of online research, thinking about what particular area you'd be most interested in. The good news is, whichever area you're interested in, there's going to be opportunities there. So I think do a bit of research, have a look at it, and then reach out to anyone in the sector, and or make some new contacts. Leverage LinkedIn and speak to people that have been on this today. But certainly, there's lots and lots of opportunities. So if you take the time to learn a bit more about it, I think you'll easily be able to identify which area you feel you'd be most suited to.
Well, and I think one of the things you and I had talked about before that really struck me, and I think is appropriate in this conversation, is you know, the data center industry does a really good job of developing talent, you know, that when you come in, there is, like Fergus said, about the pathways that they have focused on to bring people through the organization. And the fact that, you know, there are people that are in senior positions that started in as junior members of the staff. And that's something that people probably, you know, you are going to get in the door and you're going to have what you need to be successful.
I think it's one of the things that makes the sector so exciting. I know Fergus was talking about this. I could list, you know, hundreds of people that I know started at a junior level, started on a Future Leaders graduate program, now a global managing director, you know, started as a shift engineer. We sponsored him to do a master's on night shifts because he said he didn't have that much work to do. He's now, you know, a regional director for one of our fastest growing countries. We've got tons and tons of people of examples of this. And you know, Fergus will as well, Dermot, you know, everyone we know knows people that have had these amazing fast track careers. It's one of the exciting things of being in such a hyper growth sector. We're all really invested in learning and development. There's tons of opportunities. If you can demonstrate the right attitudes and behaviours and an aptitude for it, you know, there is nothing stopping you going all the way to the top and all around the world. And, you know, there's just opportunities everywhere. It's a really exciting place to be.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes. So I'm going to kind of do this last one because I want all three of you to give me some feedback on this, and I'm going to do it rapid fire. So give me your first quick thoughts. What are some of the biggest misperceptions about data center industry jobs? You know, I think that's a myth that we hear a lot about, and that, you know, it's only certain kinds of jobs. It's only construction, and those don't stay. And, you know, there's a lot of misperceptions out there. So what do you think is the biggest misperception about a data center industry job? So Dermot, I'll start with you.
Well, we actually, thanks for asking me, because there's you know, an earlier question fielded by Fergus came from somebody who wanted to transition into another role, and they were a civil engineer, and really that's behind what I'm going to say. The data center industry, in the same way as in many other industries, it impacts on just about all the things we're trying to do in life, in the world. And somebody who's a civil engineer, for example, well, the component that is civil engineering on any data center site is major. And if the Irish construction industry is major in data centers around Europe, I can tell you they are also in civil engineering. And so if you look at the actual site, you look at the hydrology related to the site, the topographical areas of the site, the substation, and actually the building itself, the base of the building, are all massive areas where there are specializations being built up or developed within civil engineering. And so therefore the transition might be an awful lot easier for somebody with that base skill into those areas, and then have a look at how they might transition elsewhere. So there's my take from it. My take from it is that it's relevant. The data center industry is absorbing from the full range of diversity of skill and behavior, and wherever you are, as a potential employee or looking to get into the industry, it's about thinking out how you can present and how you can configure your skills and your abilities to the bit of the industry that you can bring most in terms of value proposition or difference of value.
Yeah, so, no, I think that's fantastic. I think that's a really important point.
Okay.
So Teresa, what about what's your one misconception you would want to correct for people?
Biggest misconception: that you need data center experience to work in the data center sector. You do not. There's tons of training available. Everyone's really passionate about it. We are massive champions of innovation and diversity of thought. So actually coming from alternative sectors can be really value add for us as organizations and an industry. Obviously, we need people with data center experience in the sector as well. We can't go completely the other way. But I think it's compared to more static sectors, there's lots of opportunity for people with aligned skills, the right passion, the right behaviors to come in and grow with us. So just because you don't have the experience yet, don't let that put you off. Lots of people, well, everyone didn't have the experience till they were in the sector.
Yeah, that's true.
So come and learn it and come on this journey with us.
All right, Fergus, what's your take?
Well, just a myth on the construction end that it's a sort of short-term career, where if you look at the demand for data centers going forward, And if you also look at it, it's really a professional service we're providing on the engineering, then the construction and the commissioning. But the engineering piece in particular, we're not looking for people for short terms, we're looking for people for careers. And I think the construction industry has got to get its act together on that, but that's really important for us as regards, and that people can also move from the construction of data centers to the operating of data centers. And that's a very natural route because they have the expertise in that role. But again, we're selling careers, we're offering careers in the industry.
Perfect. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And I see Gary has joined us for the last few minutes of our conversation. So thanks to all three of you for joining us today. I think, you guys all offered some really interesting background information and insight as to what a data center career really looks like. And, it's not necessarily what people may think. So I appreciate you guys all joining me today and having this chat. Gary, you're muted.
I did that on purpose, of course. Thank you so much to the panelists and Joyce. But also, what I want to do first is thank those that are actually listening in. We heard a lot about from Teresa about she thought you were going to a dating site. That's interesting because ultimately, I want to thank everyone on the call for being part of the designing building of the digital front line for the last 18 months. Because if you want to know what data centers do, take away the medical front line and everything else in our world has been facilitated, including this call and this communication by data centers. So that's the industry that we're talking about today. The second thing, and we don't talk about it enough, is the fact that data centers has two words. We've talked a lot about the centers here today, but actually the magic of what this industry is doing is facilitating the data. And one small little caption is, we have got a vaccine for 7 billion people in 10 months that only 10 years ago would have taken 12 years. So let's think about that for a second. How was that facilitated? By data centers. So we talk a lot about the centers and stuff and what did they do? And it's way too much discussion around social media and all the other small parts of the overall ecosystem. So when you're looking for purpose, and this is a strong thing that we look at, if you're led by the common media around the world, you may think that data center industry is an industry I don't want to be part of, because it's part of a different narrative and maybe an older narrative connecting us to an older way of working and fossil fuels, etc. But when exactly what Joyce said, the two of the largest megatrends this decade will be decarbonisation and digitalisation. And just stop for a moment and think. You cannot decarbonise the planet without using digitalisation. How do we know that? Because all of the United Nations executives, all of the COP26 people at the end of this month will talk about we need to build smart cars, smart thermostats, smart cities, smart. Replace the smart with data and then work out, I've got to keep the rain off the data. It goes into a center. So if you're looking for a purpose, you've got to look at, I want to be part of that decarbonization of the world by building platforms to decarbonize cities. Centers, data centers are in the fundamental middle of it. So this is a big part, and the change that we're going through is all part of change. It's all part of the mixed narrative, the mixed opportunity. But data and centers are very much part of what we need to do and need to use for the next 10 years. I guess the final thing I'd say is it's wonderful being my age, looking at Ireland and looking at where we used to export people. Some came back. Now we're in a position to export companies that are repatriating profits and opportunities, which is an incredible shift and an awesome thing to see when you think of just we become what we see. So as Fergus rightly said earlier, you see a guy who in the pandemic was based in Ireland using an AR or a VR headset, instructing people in Stockholm how to commission data centers. Do you know what I had a thought? Gamers, that's what they do all their life. If you're a gamer and you're used to that virtual world, give this industry a call, because more and more of this is going to be done remotely, and those skills and application are needed. So that's me. Thank you so much for your time, all of the Teresa, Dermot, Fergus, the audience themselves. If you are looking for opportunities and you want to get going on this whole thing, drop into hostinireland.com/jobs. I don't know how many jobs we have at the moment, but it seems to be about 200 just from our small group of partners. And communicate, contact any of them, even if you are thinking you might have skills. As Teresa says, this industry is only starting. How do we know that? I'll leave you with this statistic. The amount of data that we're going to have in this new universe called the 2030, today we only have 4% of the data we need to accomplish what we'll have in 2030. There are jobs, Teresa, you teach me this, there are jobs that we don't even have names for them yet because they haven't been created yet in this industry. So this is a growing industry. We've got really strong people in it. Thank you for your time this morning. And I think that's us for today, Joyce.
Yep, that's it.
And we just ask all the gang who are all hiding their faces to come in and say goodbye. Tanya, come on. Michelle, Carla, come in and we just say goodbye. I think we're done. See, these are all the people that do all the real work. I'm so glad you all came and showed yourself. Mira, thank you so much.